Ladies and gentlemen, our program. Ladies and gentlemen, our program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take your seats.
Sometimes late when things are real and people share the gift of gab between themselves. Some are quick to take the bait and catch the perfect prize that waits among the shells. But Oz never did give nothing to the Tin Man that he didn't already have. And cause never was the reason for the evening or the Tropic of Sir Galahad. So please believe in me when I say I'm spinning round, 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 round. Smoke, glass, stain, bright curl, image going down, 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 down. Soap, sud, green light bulb. Oh, Oz never did give nothing to the Tin Man that he didn't already have. And cause never was the reason for the evening or the Tropic of Sir Galahad. So please.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host for this morning's program, the Honorable Michael Falkender, AFPI Co-Chair of American Prosperity, and the former Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Treasury Department.
Everybody just clap your hands, clap, clap, warriors hands, clap, clap, with my warriors hands.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the America First Speaker Series. For those of you who may not know us, AFPI, the America First Policy Institute, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research institute dedicated to advancing policies that put the American people first. Since our founding, we've taken that policy outside of Washington, bringing members of Congress, governors, and administration leaders directly to communities across the country. Today, we're proud to bring the Great American Comeback Tour to Hales Corner, Wisconsin, with two leaders who know exactly what it takes to restore the American dream of home ownership, HUD Secretary Scott Turner and Congressman Brian Stile. From cutting red tape and rooting out housing fraud to expanding opportunity zones and building more homes right here in Wisconsin, this conversation is about the policies putting the American dream back within reach. So please join me in welcoming Secretary Turner and Congressman Stile to the stage. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me start with a quick introduction. The Honorable Scott Turner was confirmed by the United States Senate on February 5th, 2025, as the 19th Secretary of Housing, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. He previously served as the Executive Director of the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, working with state, local, tribal, and territorial governments across the country to revitalize economically distressed areas, promote affordable housing, and the creation of new businesses. Prior to that, he represented the 33rd District in Texas State Legislature from 2013 to 2017. But of course, most of you may know that he also played 9 seasons in the National Football League with the Washington Redskins, the San Diego Chargers, and the Denver Broncos. Oh, come on. Congressman Brian Stiles represented Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District since 2019, currently serves as chairman of the House Administration Committee. His work on the Financial Services Committee includes issues affecting housing, financial services, job creation, and long-term economic growth. Before entering Congress, Congressman Stiles spent a decade working in Wisconsin's manufacturing industry, and he also served on the University of Wisconsin Board of Regents, where he supported efforts to keep higher education affordable for students and for families. So please join me in welcoming the two of them. Before we get started, please join me in welcoming a champion for workforce development, opportunity zones, and economic freedom for the people of Racine to lead us in prayer, Mr. Will Martin.
Secretary, I also know that you were a pastor, and so I know you'd be better at doing this than me, but I'm going to do my best. Lord, would we all bow our heads in prayer? Lord God, we come before you today thankful for a nation full of freedom and opportunity. We thank you, Lord, that where we are born is not what determines how high we rise in this nation. In this 250th year of our nation, we give you thanks for the founders. We know that you say in your word that where the people have no vision, they perish. Well, Lord, you gave them a vision, and in return, they acknowledged you. Lord, we come here today. We thank you for the elected and appointed officials in this room. We come to learn from one another, and we hope that you will give us a spirit to leave this place, to use what we learn in the furtherance and betterment of our neighbors and our nation. In the name that is above all names, we pray. Amen.
And now, if you'll please help me welcome Milwaukee County Supervisor Patty Logston to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get into our discussion, let me also recognize 2 guests that we have with us. Brian Schimming, former head of the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority, and also Congressman Tom Tiffany, representing Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us. So let's get started. Let me start with Secretary Turner. President Trump's taken unprecedented action to lower the cost of housing and the cost of living for Americans. Can you tell us more about what he's done to make the American dream possible for Wisconsinites?
Yes, sir. And it's so great to be here in Wisconsin with the congressman and with my dear friend, Mr. Falkender, and also Dewey, our regional administrators here with us. The president has made it very clear that he's laser focused on housing affordability and just affordability overall for the people in our country. I know at HUD in the last year, we helped over 1.5 million people through our FHA mortgage insurance program to be able to afford to buy a home. 1.5 million, and 80% of those were first-time home buyers. We travel around the country. We often hear millennials and Gen Z talk about how am I going to be able to afford to buy a home. And one thing that the mainstream media doesn't tell the American people about the good things that are going on in the administration. 1.5 million people, 80% of those are first-time home buyers, and that's just through HUD. That's just through FHA, and we'll get into more later about the executive orders that the president has signed to bring down housing affordability, to increase construction. And so, but our FHA program has been one thing, the 2 executive orders, and working interagency and with our partners on the Hill with the congressman and his colleagues to bring down housing affordability. I would tell the American people, those that are sitting in the audience and those that are watching, the president, number one, is keeping our country safe, from a lunatic regime, from having a nuclear weapon. And he's laser focused on domestic policy. And one of those is making sure that more Americans can afford to be able to buy a home.
Congressman, in addition to the work that the administration is doing, you developed an innovative bill to reduce the cost of housing called the Accelerating Home Building Act. Importantly, it was included in the bipartisan 21st Century Road to Housing Act that recently became law. Can you talk a little bit about how this law will cut red tape, accelerate home construction, and help Wisconsin communities?
Thanks, and thanks both for being here. Welcome to Wisconsin. You got a few Packer fans in the audience. I hope that's all right. Hopefully no Bears fans. No, kidding. We have a couple of those down in the southern part of the state, but that's allowed. The 21st Century Road to Housing is a great piece of legislation that really cuts through red tape. And I think that's what we have been focused on from this administration in particular, is saying, where do we get government out of the way? I was in the business sector. I was in the manufacturing sector before I came, and you'd always just want to pound your head against a brick wall when you'd watch the federal government come in and put in blocks from people developing jobs here in the United States. On the housing front, we see all these regulatory burdens that are preventing the construction of new homes. And as we increase supply, you can bring down costs to allow families to get in. Janelle Branham and I, there's a core concept in here that says one way to break down the regulatory barriers, let's have pre-approval in advance of the construction. And so instead of waiting when somebody says, I have an idea, we can take this new area of land. What if we build single-family homes? What if we build multifamily housing? What if we build duplexes in this area? And then they go and they begin the process of trying to get approval. What if we work that in reverse and we say, here's this piece of land. This area is pre-approved for single-family homes of this type in this area. And if anybody wants to come in and build in this space, you can start day one. That is the core concept that I think is really important to do, this pre-approval inside building areas so that we can get quicker to getting those shovels in the ground, to getting the construction built. And it's a piece of the puzzle of unlocking and making housing more affordable for families here in the U.S.
Mr. Secretary, one of the things you and I worked on together in the first term was opportunity zones. They were created to bring private investment into communities that had been overlooked. Talk a bit more about the results that opportunity zones have delivered, and how does making it permanent in the Big Beautiful Bill build on the success that we've already seen?
Yes, sir. So the opportunity zones were created in 2018 with the signing of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the TCJA. And the question arose, what can we do for families that are living in the forgotten communities around our country, those rural and urban and tribal communities that were once thriving but are now, dilapidated and boarded and blighted up. And so as a result of the TCJA, the Opportunity Zone legislation came in to effect. And thus far, Opportunity Zones have lifted 1 million people in our country out of poverty. You think about 1 million individuals, how many families that actually represents. 400,000 new housing units have been built. 500,000 new jobs have been created. Housing values inside of opportunity zones have risen 3.4%, so our rents have remained stable. 60% of the people that live inside of opportunity zones actually own their homes. And so you're talking about a transformative policy from President Trump's first term and lifting American people in distressed communities, new job creation, new housing, new entrepreneurs. And there's so many stories around the country. Here in Wisconsin, I visited the rail yards, which was a tremendous product. It used to be an old factory, and now it's a mixed-use development that has created jobs and housing and retail for the people of this great state. And so, Mr. Faulkner, the opportunity zones have been transformative. Now that the working family tax cuts with my friend Congressman Stile and his friends have made permanent the opportunity zones, the anticipation of what this next tranche and this next iteration of opportunity zones will do has me very excited. I traveled around the country in the first term, working opportunity zones, being an ambassador, and so literally have seen things go from a concept to reality, to people's lives being impacted. You think about 1 million of your countrymen being lifted out of poverty. off the poverty rolls and how many people that represents. And that was just the first round. So I'm looking forward to the second one.
Congressman, same question. We've made opportunity zones permanent. Talk about what it's meant for Wisconsin and what making it permanent is going to mean for bringing investment here into this part of Wisconsin.
Making things permanent, I think, is more important than I think some people realize. The folks who are making these big investments in our communities, they want to know that they have an ability to build on that those tax regimes are going to be there next time around, that you're not going to have this whipsaw. And then the question is, what is occurring? A lot of our manufacturing base in Wisconsin, under really dumb policies decades ago, peeled out of some of our core cities. I see Will Martin in Racine. We saw that in areas of the city of Racine, Beloit, Janesville, Kenosha. We see it in the city of Milwaukee. And then the question is, how do we get folks to come back and make that investment right back in our cities where people are living? And so some of these businesses are going back and forth, and what we're trying to do is nudge them across the line to make that investment in our cities where people are already living. We see that. We see investment coming into Racine. We see this in other areas in the state of Wisconsin. And now people that have the ability to come in and invest that capital to create jobs, to create housing, to create businesses are coming into these communities and lifting them back up in addressing the fact that there were really dumb policies decades ago that pulled out a lot of the jobs from the center of our cities, and those jobs went elsewhere. This is about saying, let's unwind those dumb policies from decades ago. Let's put in a smart, forward-looking policy that says, let's invest right here in our communities. And we are seeing those shovels in the ground, in particular in Racine and other communities in this state. And I think it has a huge runway and opportunity in front of us to double down now that this is a permanent tax structure where we're going to see more investment in our cities. And I think that's great for communities across the state of Wisconsin, across the country.
Mr. Secretary, part of those dumb policies have enabled a lot of fraud to take place. And one of the things you've really made an important part of your secretaryship is investigating the housing fraud from Minnesota to Los Angeles. Can you update us on the latest on the task force's effort, and how will that manifest itself for the American people in making housing more affordable?
Yes, sir. You know, when we came in to this administration under President Trump's leadership and J.D., Vice President J.D. Vance, who's leading this task force on fraud. You know, fraud really is corruption. That's the word for it. And waste, fraud, and abuse has been rampant. In the previous administration, during the Biden administration, they prioritized spending over stewardship. We're reversing that. We're prioritizing stewardship, faithful stewardship, over American taxpayer dollars. Because Americans work hard to earn their money. And it's our job as stewards, the congressman, myself, Deputy Secretary Faulkner, when he was in, our job is to steward over taxpayer dollars and not to waste it. And we've had so many. Yeah, that's a good hand clap. Yes. And so one example, at HUD, we have the what you call continuum of care. And that's to take care of our homeless neighbors around the country. And there's been billions of dollars in the continuum of care around the country that has been distributed to continuum of care entities, if you will. There's 400 of them. And one instance in L.A., there was $23 million that was stolen that was supposed to go towards giving 3 meals a day to our homeless brothers and sisters. But instead, this particular gentleman, who has been found out, by the way, spent $23 million on luxury cars, vacation homes, and private jet travel. In the Virgin Islands, in L.A., La Hazda, the housing authority that's over homelessness, we just had to investigate and penalize them because of using taxpayer money in a fraudulent, corruptive way. And I say all that to you because I want you to understand the focus of this administration. The focus is not just to award people, in particular in homelessness, because of the amount of bodies that you have in the homeless industrial complex. That's not success. You award the amount of people that go from homelessness to being healed and transformed to self-sufficiency. Are y'all with me? It's a different paradigm. And so we're going after corruption. We're going after fraud. We're going after waste. I know here in your beloved state of Wisconsin, there's cases in Minnesota, in Boston, in Washington State, L.A., Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico. It's all over our country. But the difference with this administration is that we're not going to turn the blind eye because we care for the American people.
You know, Mr. Secretary, I remember when I went through the confirmation process, I had a senator questioning me and berating me a bit because we were advocating for reducing the Medicaid rolls. And I said, Senator, last time I looked, when somebody gets a job and therefore no longer needs Medicaid, that's a good thing that we used to celebrate on a bipartisan basis. Congressman, you know, thinking about the efforts of the administration to combat waste, fraud, and abuse, what can Congress do in order to legislate and enable the administration to do more, to go after some of these excessive costs, to strengthen program integrity, and make sure that housing dollars are actually reaching hardworking Americans?
That's the key. How are the dollars spent? Let me build on what you both just said. I think one of the defining differences between conservatives and liberals, between common sense and crazy, between the democratic socialists that we see that are out there, we are focused on the output. They are focused on the input. So if you ask a raging liberal, how successful is a program? And they would say, well, how much did you spend? And you say, well, last year I spent $1,000. And they'd say, well, what are you spending this year? Well, $2,000. Wow, it's twice as good. And so what they want to see is how much did you spend on it. As conservatives, we want to see how well did the program work? Did it help the people it was intended to? And that's why, as a conservative, I get so frustrated. I think everybody in the audience gets so frustrated with the waste, fraud, and abuse. Because it is more money on the input side and less productivity on the output side. This is my manufacturing background that I come in with. And so when the Democrats were allowing the waste, fraud, and abuse to go on, the example of the individual that took money that should have gone to homeless individuals and was spending it on luxury cars. When we saw the Medicaid fraud, where individuals in Milwaukee, a woman was recently sentenced, and she was buying fancy purses and all sorts of other luxury items. On the Democrat side, they were looking and saying, wow, we're doing a great job. We're spending more money in Medicaid. We're spending more money through HUD. We must be doing a great job, pat ourselves on the back, because they didn't care how that money was being utilized. The conservatives were looking at it and saying, are we actually using that money to help people and get them back up and on their feet? And if that money is being swindled, stolen, and wasted, we know it's not. And so making sure that we're empowering our agencies, having great leaders like the secretary here, isn't he doing a great job at HUD? Having a secretary who cares about the output and is actually bird dogging how this money is being spent and measuring it. If you're measuring the output, you start to find that waste, fraud, and abuse. We find that on the Medicaid side. We want to help people who need the assistance for the Americans that these programs were designed for. What we want to root out is the waste, fraud, and abuse where people are stealing those funds. And so if we're actually tracking the output of these programs, like you were talking about, if an individual goes and gets a job and is able to successfully get back up and on their feet, that shows the success of the program, and we should congratulate ourselves that it's working well. When the money is just going out the door to these to individuals who are defrauding the program, and we see that in Milwaukee, we saw that up in Green Bay, we know we have an opportunity to bird dog this better in the state of Wisconsin than we're doing today under our current leadership in the state. And we have made great strides under the President Trump's leadership, and in large part by having great people from Dewey Strobel to the secretary to others who are actually looking to root out this waste, fraud, and abuse in so many of these programs. And the more that we are thoughtfully measuring the output, we are going to be better at actually rooting out this waste, fraud, and abuse. And we've made great strides, but there's a lot more work to be done.
So, Mr. Secretary, another place that there's a lot of waste is just the bureaucratic red tape that goes into housing construction in particular. You know, one of my favorite examples that we fixed in the Road to Housing bill was we finally got rid of the requirement to have a chassis on a manufactured home, because it's not as if any of them ever get transported anywhere. But we at AFPI have estimated that about a quarter of new housing costs come from regulatory compliance. So can you talk about how HUD is cutting burdensome regulations so that builders can build and families can afford housing?
Yes, sir. So we came in, and everything that Mr. Faulkner said is so true. You know, a quarter of the cost of a single-family home is in regulation. 40% of a multifamily home is in regulation. And so if you build a single-family house, think about $100,000 of just regulations on a median price house of $426,000. $100,000 is in regulation. And so when we came in, so we're going to take inventory, you know, of every program at HUD and everything that we do. Is it the money being used for its intended purpose? Is it helping the people it's supposed to help? And so we started looking at all the bureaucratic red tape that goes on at HUD. And now when you transition to housing and construction, when you think about $100,000, that's unsustainable. So the first thing we did at HUD is we took down a rule called the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Rule. That's a mouthful, right? So we took down AFFH, which literally made HUD a national zoning board that would tell Milwaukee, Wisconsin, how you're supposed to build your neighborhoods. Well, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Racine, Green Bay, you have unique needs inside of your neighborhood that the citizens, the community, and the leaders know what you need. Washington, the bureaucrats in Washington should not be able to tell you how you should build your neighborhood. So we took AFFH down, restored the localities with freedom and flexibility. AFFH, by the way, did not build one single house. It just cost a lot of money, so we took that down. We've also just published our best practices report. Our best practices report is a culmination of research that we've done around the states of local and state governments that are using good practices like reducing duplicative fees, taking those down, making zoning easier in neighborhoods. And so we put a compilation together, which is on our website at HUD.gov, of our regulatory best practices. Hey, if this city is not utilizing this, maybe you should do what other cities are doing that are actually building and constructing homes for the American people. And so taking down these regulations, producing our best practices report, working with local experts, so people that are in the building industry, developers, builders, construction. They said the number one thing is red tape. The number one thing is a regulatory environment. So we've been tearing that down from the federal level and firmly encouraging those on the local level. We cannot mandate it, but we can encourage strongly that local levels do the same. Take inventory of your regulatory environment and make it easier to build and easier to buy.
So, Congressman, the slow permitting, the onerous mandates, the layers of regulation that the Secretary just talked about, it's great that the Trump administration is coming in and through rulemaking undoing a lot of these things, but of course anything that's undone by rulemaking can get redone by a future administration if things were to change. How can Congress come in and make permanent some of these eliminations? What work can Congress do to make sure that these reductions in costs outlast more than just this administration?
So much of this is codifying what the administration is doing. A fancy word to say, let's actually take these rule changes and put them into law. Because what we have seen is if we don't have it in law, a future administration, if it ever goes back the other way, will come in and unwind all the good work that's been done. And so we have the task, while we control the House, we control the Senate and the White House, to go in and to make these rule changes permanent. We've made strides in this in the most recent housing bill. There is more work to be done because we have to take the good work that's being done and make it permanent. The other piece of this on the housing side is we know that there is federal bureaucracy, but there's also state and local bureaucracy, and the state of Wisconsin has a huge opportunity here in the after the next election to come in. I see my friend Tom Tiffany nodding in the front row, to come in and remove the regulatory burdens that are in place in the state of Wisconsin that are slowing us down as well. And if we get an all of the above approach in the state of Wisconsin with the leadership at the federal level under the secretary and under the president, and we couple that with good leadership here in the state of Wisconsin, we can make real serious progress in our state to bring down those costs of housing so that we're all marching to the same thing. Cut through the regulatory burden, cut through the red tape, and actually help people get in to a new or their first home.
So, Mr. Secretary, you mentioned that the president signed an executive order on day one to lower the cost of housing, and another in March, removing regulatory barriers to home construction. Can you talk about some of the results we're already seeing from the executive implementation of the executive order?
Yes, sir. So when you think about taking down barriers, that word barrier is strong, but that's exactly what bureaucracy is. It's a barrier to build. And so the president, being a builder himself, knows the barriers that the construction and development industry faces, signed these two executive orders to remove barriers to building affordable housing, period, plain and simple. And so taking down AFFH, producing the best practice report, making these things permanent, going inside of our locality. I think I've been to over 50 cities around our country already, and the number one thing we talk to mayors and localities about is remove regulatory barriers so builders can build. And so we have seen some movement. We've seen some construction. We've seen some development. Opportunity zones are going to be a great help for that. But when the president signed these two new executive orders, the other one was to increase the credit market so that the hometown lenders, the community banks, could actually come back to the table. Because since Dodd-Frank, the community banks have really been pushed back from being that hometown lender, in particular in our rural areas for low to moderate income and for first-time home buyers. And so our hope is that with this executive orders, that community banks can come back to the table, increase the mortgage game, that potentially more buyers, first-time home buyers, rural home buyers, low to moderate income buyers, will be able to afford to buy a home. Also at HUD, in partnership with FHFA, we announced that we will begin to take Vantage Score 4.0, which is a credit system, and FICO 10T. And what this does, it will give, in particularly younger buyers, first-time home buyers, who have a great rental history that will count on their credit report to potentially make them be able to afford to get a mortgage and buy a home. Because before you can't use rental history. And so with Vantage Score 4.0, this will be an additive that hopefully in the next coming months that more Americans will be able to afford to buy a home or potentially get a mortgage. Now, you still have to be credit worthy. You still have to be a trustworthy borrower. The rigor is still there. But this will just expand the credit market for more people in America. So I believe when taking down these barriers, increasing mortgage credit, building more, developing more, getting rid of the red tape, those things are taking root, and more Americans will be able to afford to buy a home.
So, Congressman, in addition to some of the regulatory barriers, there are some tax provisions that lock homeowners into their homes. And so one of the ones I've been railing against, for instance, is that we have not touched the exemption on the home equity capital gain in 30 years. And so as a result of the Joe Biden inflation we saw prices for everything go up. Home prices have gone up. But if you think about a lot of the increase in the capital gain that they're realizing, it was just because of inflation. And yet if an empty nester stays in their home, they don't pay the capital gains tax. But if they move somewhere else, they incur a Joe Biden inflation tax. So is there more we can do on the tax code to bring in more housing supply and encourage greater affordability of homes?
So many people get locked into their home for a whole host of different reasons. One is lower rates. This opportunity to tackle inflation so that we can bring the rates down and address the fact that Joe Biden came and spent massive amounts of money will unlock a lot of people. Other people have the tax complications of what happens if they want to sell their house. Do they get hit when they buy and move into a new house, especially folks that are later in life who want to maybe downsize their home and move into a smaller home. Kids are out of the house. They don't need as much of a home. Unlocking all of these barriers so that people aren't tied into their house is going to be absolutely essential to unlock that and get people up. And then that starts this whole pipeline. And what the Secretary is talking about, I think, is really important about how do you look, in particular people who are currently paying the rent, how do you get them from paying the rent to paying the mortgage? And I think that is such a powerful piece. We got a lot of great people in the state of Wisconsin who meet their bills, who are credit worthy, but they're to show that is really that they're paying their rent on time, in full, every month. And the current system doesn't reward those people. So if you already own a home or you have creditworthiness because you've done pretty well in life, you can kind of navigate that. But, man, there's a lot of people right now who are paying their rent, who are working hard, who are doing the right thing, and the system has been set up to not reward those people from the fact that they're paying their rent. That says to the bank, it says to all the financial people, this is a really good person to bet on. Let's reward that person so they can go from paying the rent to paying the mortgage. And to me, that is the biggest difference that we can make inside HUD, and the work you're doing on that is spectacular.
So let me stick with you, Congressman. There was arguably one of the most important pieces of legislation over the last couple of years is the working family tax credit. For the average family here in Wisconsin with 2 or more children, they saved $2,023 in 2025. So can you talk about what are some of the provisions of the working families tax credit that have been so meaningful for residents here in Wisconsin?
The tax reforms we passed on the One Big Beautiful Bill have a huge impact on families here. I was telling these guys behind the stage because they haven't maybe had the benefit of having the fish fry here at Clifford's. If you haven't, see, we got some locals there. That's good. And so on the other side of this wall from the banquet room is the restaurant. You go into the restaurant. I was talking to the owner just the other day, and he's owned Clifford's now for about 38 years. And I was talking to a waitress who was here who does the fish fry on Friday nights and has done it on Friday night. She has another job, but she does Friday nights for about 30 years. The fish fry started, if my memory serves me, it's $6.95. It's now $21. It's still a pretty good deal for an all-you-can-eat fish fry. And we were talking about the impact that the no tax on tips has on her. Meaningful and changing. I was talking to another person who's working overtime, not in the restaurant, in another business, and we were talking about the impact that no tax on overtime has. Encouraging people to pick up that extra shift. If you have a need for you and your family, you have an opportunity to work a little bit of overtime, let's help you out. And let's not only give you the overtime, let's encourage you to take more of that pay home. That's a good thing. We want to encourage work. On the family side, we took the child tax credit and we doubled it. Hardworking families, you're raising kids. Kids are obviously expensive. Anybody who's got kids says yes. And so this is an opportunity to take working families, people that are actually going out, getting off, working their tails off, giving them an opportunity to keep more of that money in their pocket so that they can buy the things they and their family needs. And the reforms that we made in the One Big Beautiful Bill that will have a real and direct impact on working families here in the state of Wisconsin is significant, but it's going to be getting the word out to make sure everybody understands this. Most people saw it when they went and they filed their taxes. Some people file their taxes in a way where they just type it in online and don't look at the details of this. Making sure that we have people fully understanding why they're taking more money home, that it is the reforms that we put in place in the One Big Beautiful Bill is going to be a big piece of the next 98 days, talking to folks about the reforms that we made, how it's impacting you, and why we are working on behalf of working people here in the state of Wisconsin.
Before I get to the last question, Mr. Secretary, anything on the One Big Beautiful Bill that you wanted to add to what the Congressman said?
Well, I think that's beautiful. I can listen to that all day because you're talking about American people and helping the American people to thrive, not just to survive. And I read a note that the One Big Beautiful Bill or the working family tax cuts will add up to about $6,400 per family in income right here in Wisconsin. And about 125,000 jobs will be saved. And there's no taxes on Social Security, which will impact about 1 million of our beloved citizens of Wisconsin. Yes, sir, about 1 million. And so just to add color, this legislation, and this was the biggest tax refund season in the history of our country because of the working family tax cut. And that's something that we can celebrate together, that people work hard. And the tax refunds that so many families in America look forward to, this was the biggest tax refund season in our country. And so I'm really encouraged by that.
So, closing question for both of you, and it's returning to a theme that both of you mentioned before, which is the idea that the assistance that the government provides is not supposed to be a permanent dependency. Instead, it is supposed to be a temporary measure, a lifeline to help people temporarily. So starting with you, Mr. Secretary, and I know this is something you've been passionate about, what has HUD been doing to encourage residents in HUD housing to find work and move beyond generational dependency?
Well, our heart is this. Our heart is that we get more people off of government subsidies to a life of self-sufficiency. Not to get more people on government subsidy, but to get able-bodied, able-minded people in our country off of government subsidies to a life of self-sufficiency and self-sustainability. At HUD, we have public housing authorities. About how many do we have? Do we 35 or 3,800 public housing authorities around our country, which is way too many, by the way. About 4 million people, 4 million individuals on Section 8. But 90% of people on Section 8, and I have it written down right here, 90% of able-bodied people on Section 8 vouchers will spend over 5 years in HUD-supported housing, and half of them will spend more than 15 years. So you think 90% spend 5 years or more, and over 50% spend 15 years or more on HUD-funded housing, Section 8 voucher. I have met multiple people, generations, 3 generations in one particular housing authority. She was raised there. She's 53, 54 now. We're the same age, and now she's raising her daughter there. Able-bodied, able-minded. But that's just the way it's always been, and so some people think, well, this is the way that it's always going to be. Well, as a Christian, as a pastor, as a father, as a secretary, this doesn't have to be the way it has to be for you, right? I thank God for this job for such a time, to encourage people that work restores dignity. And so we have our Work and Dignity Coalition, where we have over 200 public housing authorities already signed up. We believe that when you restore work, you restore dignity to people. And you don't just tell people to go work. And so we have a new proposed rule for work requirements and time limits, where if you're receiving HUD-funded housing, then you are required, the public housing authorities have the flexibility to require those that you work 20 or more hours per week, and you get up to 5 years inside of HUD-funded housing. But with that, it doesn't end there. We'll put wraparound services around you, financial literacy, resume building, right, child care, and other things to help the American people learn how to do a resume, learn how to interview, learn how to present yourself. And we met 2 ladies, and I'll turn it over to the congressman. I met 2 ladies in Champaign, Illinois, where I went to school, at the Champaign County Housing Authority. These ladies had been a part of the Work and Dignity, the program there in Champaign. So they went from being on HUD-funded housing to now both of them are homeowners, and they're raising their children in their own home for the very first time.
Congressman, same question. I think the longer I've been doing work in economic policy, the more I realize that a lot of the structural problems we have are not economic in nature. They are some of these social issues, and making sure that, as the secretary just said, we return to the values and dignity of work, not just as an economic means, but because it provides people with purpose. It actually increases life expectancy. It increases happiness. How do we, and that's one of the most important things we did in the big, beautiful bill, was to say to able-bodied prime-age workers, there should be a work requirement or a school requirement or service to your local community. How can we in Congress, how can you and members in Congress reinstill some of those values to the American people?
We have to keep thinking about our social safety net programs as a trampoline and not as a hammock. That if you fall on hard times, we want the system to be able to lift you back up and onto your feet. That's why in programs like the secretary was talking about, or the programs that we put in place in Medicaid reforms, to put in place work requirements for able-bodied childless adults of working age. So people that can work, they're in their prime, they don't have kids, and they aren't working today. How do we help them get back up and on their feet? And one of them is to say, let's keep these programs in place, as the secretary was talking about, if you need them. But let's have you out there working 20 hours a week, looking for work, volunteering, or going to school so that you're in a position to get a better or a good or better paying job down the road. So it is not about measuring these programs simply by how much money we spend. It's measuring these programs by the output and how many people we actually help back into a life of self-sustainability. And I think at the core of this, as the secretary said, there is a dignity in work. And embracing work is a core concept here, but helping people who need that help get back up and on their feet and measuring us by that level of success. And when you use that as the measure, not the measure of how much money did we spend, let's not look at waste, fraud, and abuse. That's the wrong measure. To measure how many people did we help by the money we spent, we have done a spectacular job over the course of the past 18 months.
I want to thank you both for your leadership on these issues. Thank you for joining us. Please join me in thanking both of them for being with us this morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's program. On behalf of our host, the America First Policy Institute, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your attendance and wish you a safe and enjoyable rest of your day.